Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Kathryn McKellar and I am the director and co-founder of Opera on Tap Boston. We are beyond thrilled to be collaborating with Brennan Shapiro and Boston Singers Resource and Opera on Tap roster soprano Nina Evelyn to bring this program to Boston audiences and audiences elsewhere. I just want to give a little intro about Nina. She recently graduated with her Master's of Music from the Boston Conservatory at Berklee and is currently a P.S.C. candidate there. She's hailed as powerful and ready for prime time, and her mission is to diversify the classical music canon by promoting and performing the works of Black composers. Upcoming performances include singing the role of Helena in Britain's A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Huntington Theatre, and a concert with Heritage Chorale featuring the music of Florence Price and Margaret Bonds. If you want to find out more about Opera on Tap, BSR, or Nina, please see the QR codes on your programs and or come up to Brendan or myself after this workshop. And now I am thrilled to introduce the woman who curated this afternoon's program, soprano Nina Evelyn Anderson. Please give her a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. Super excited to be here talking about this repertoire that I have had the privilege to study over the past 5 or 6 years. It's repertoire that means so much to me, and I'm really excited to share a little bit about the major contributions composers of the African diaspora have made to classical vocal music. So we're going to go by era, and we're going to start with the classical era. So starting with Joseph Bologne, Chevalier de Saint-Georges. He was a French violinist, conductor, and also soldier and fencer. He had many, many skills, and what was interesting about him during the time of his life, he was a free Black man born to Georges Bologne de Saint-Georges in Guadeloupe, the colony of France. And his father was a plantation owner, and his mother was a Creole slave. So at age 7 years old, he began his formal education in France. His father brought him from Guadeloupe back to France, and he started his formal music studies. There's not really a lot known about his early musical studies, but due to how proficient he was at violin in his older age, it is assumed that he studied very intensely from a very young age. And he had a very extensive career both as a violinist and as a conductor. He conducted at the Paris Opera. He also conducted various orchestras in France and Europe. He probably would have had a more successful career had it not been for the racism that he struggled with during his lifetime. At one point he was about to be appointed to be the music director for the Paris Opera, but it didn't go through because the leading ladies did not want to have to take orders from a Black man. But he's very important in history because he was the first Black composer to achieve really great success as a composer and musician in Europe. So let's talk a little bit about his vocal music. So he's written some operas, which most of these operas, the scores are completely lost. For a couple of them, there are numbers with scores that still survive, but only one of them is a full score still surviving, and that is L'Amant Anonyme, also known as The Anonymous Lover, which Boston Lyric Opera has done just last month. And this image you can see is from that production that Boston Lyric Opera did, featuring Omar as well as Brianna Robinson. So the other two pieces that have numbers that still have scores available are Ernestine. There's an aria and a duet, I believe, and also La Partie de Chasse. Every other piece, pretty much scores are lost. He wrote 2 Italian canzonettas, and then he also has a collection of songs and duets with orchestra that is available at the National Library in France. So that is all of his vocal music output that we have access to or we know of. But he was very groundbreaking as one of the first. Moving on to the Romantic period, we're going to be focusing on these two major composers, Harry Thacker Burleigh and Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. Starting with Burleigh, his dates are 1866 to 1949, and he was an American baritone, arranger, as well as a composer. And the really interesting thing about his life in particular is that he grew up singing from a very young age. His grandfather was a singer and taught him traditional spirituals and slave songs. And even as he got to high school, he was known as one of the most accomplished classical singers in his hometown, Erie, Pennsylvania. So he was working at churches, synagogues, community events. He was the hired singer, even when he was at a very young age in high school. At the age of 26, he began his studies at the National Conservatory of Music in New York. And what's interesting about this is that at first he was admitted to the conservatory, but he was not offered any scholarship money, which means he was not originally going to be able to attend. But this woman, Frances McDowell, who worked for the registrar, she had so much faith in Burleigh's talent that she insisted that he be given another chance at his entrance exam. And so he was able to retake that entrance exam and then receive the scholarship he needed to attend. While he was studying at the National Conservatory of Music, to support himself, he worked as a handyman, janitor, like basically an assistant to this woman at the registrar who helped get him that scholarship money. And while he was working, he would sing while he worked, and during this time, he caught the attention of Antonin Dvorak, who was the conservatory director of the National Conservatory of Music during that period. So when he would sing these traditional spirituals, and Dvorak was so curious about them, he and Dvorak ended up having a friendship, a relationship, where Burleigh would share these spiritual melodies with Dvorak. And these very same melodies were what inspired Dvorak when he wrote his New World Symphony. And in addition to these spiritual melodies that he introduced Dvorak to, he composed lots of art songs and also lots of spiritual arrangements. You all may know him for his spiritual arrangements, but he also wrote over 200 art songs, secular art songs. And during his lifetime, his art songs and his spiritual arrangements were very popular. So it got to the point where in 1916 and 17, he published his spiritual arrangements of Deep River, which kind of skyrocketed him into popularity. If you were a recitalist during that time, it would be weird to not include a Burleigh song or arrangement. That's how popular they were. So in addition to that, he was a founding member of the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. And if we talk about let me not get ahead of myself. Sorry, everyone. That's right, it's on this page. Okay, so we're talking Burleigh's legacy. So he was a very strong advocate for the study and performance of spirituals, and he coached many singers who are renowned for singing spirituals, including Marian Anderson, Roland Hayes, Paul Robeson. And like I said earlier, he introduced Dvorak to Black American music, which influenced him greatly in his later compositions. And he was really instrumental in developing a characteristically American style of music. And so that's why he's important. And if we're talking about vocal music by Burleigh, like I said, he wrote between 200 and 300 art songs and spiritual arrangements. I've listed a few collections of his songs and spirituals below, but there are many more. So the spirituals of Burleigh, that's the picture that's kind of brown and white here. I have this book, and these are probably some of his most well-known arrangements. And then this green photo, this is a brand new anthology that actually came out within the last year, curated by Dr. Louise Toppin, and this is 47 of Burleigh's art songs. So now, I'm going to share with you a performance. I'm going to sing an art song by Burleigh called Lovely, Dark, and Lonely One. And me and Brendan are going to share this with you. All right. All right, sorry, I was supposed to have that up. That's not great. Anyway, now we're moving on to Coleridge-Taylor. All right, dates born 1875 and lived until 1912. And he was a British conductor as well as a composer. And he grew up in a very musical family. So his father was a violinist, and a lot of family members on his mother's side of his family were musicians as well. So his mother was an English woman, and his father was a Creole man from Sierra Leone. His early music study included attending Royal College of Music for composition, starting at age 15. And during that time, he composed a lot. One of the first people to help him achieve success in his career as a composer was Edward Elgar, who had recommended him for the Three Choirs Festival, which was a summer festival held in July, a summer choral festival. And for that, he presented one of his choral pieces, and that kind of put him on the map. That, in addition to mentors really helping him get along with his P.S.C. Hiawatha's Wedding Feast. That was a very important piece for him becoming known in London and also in the United States. So due to his success of his cantata Hiawatha's Wedding Feast, he was able to tour the United States in 1904, 1906, and 1910. And what's really characteristic of his compositional style is that he really wanted to weave African music into the classical music tradition. So you'll hear a lot of the, what we characterize maybe as like romantic era style, along with those roots of African music as well. Okay. Moving on to his vocal music. So he wrote one opera, and it was called Thelma, and I have 1907 written here, but it's not we're not sure whether it was composed sometime between 1907 and 1909. So that's around the time period that was composed. And it was actually thought to have been lost for a really long time. It wasn't until the 2000s that a full score was found of this opera in the British Library, all his full manuscripts. So this opera is actually, there's a vocal score and also manuscripts of the full score. But the full score does not have the text from the vocal score written all the way through, but the vocal score has all the parts and the text. So this opera was performed, I believe, in 2012 for the first time. And it is in its full complete version. So it could be done again if you want to have any ideas. So again, he wrote a few cantatas. What I mentioned before, Hiawatha's Wedding Feast, and this piece was based on the epic poem of Song of Hiawatha. And this piece was extremely popular. It's mainly chorus and orchestra with one solo for tenor and orchestra in this piece. And so during his lifetime, this piece was being performed as often as Handel's Messiah, and Mendelssohn's Elijah. It was rivaling the popularity of those pieces during his lifetime. Now it's not performed as often, but during his lifetime, it was extremely popular. In addition to his cantatas, he also wrote tons of art songs. I've listed a few of the collections here, but he's also written tons of standalone art songs as well. And I'll be sharing one of those with you. There it is. This is Life and Death by Samuel Coleridge-Taylor with text by Jessie Adelaide Middleton. Contemporaries, also that I was not able to mention, of this same era, Edmond Dede, who was a Creole-American composer, lots of French compositions, if you're interested in that. And we also have R. Nathaniel Dett, who is a Canadian-American composer of this same area, and Scott Joplin, King of Ragtime, who he's known mostly for his piano rags, but he also wrote around 10 or 15 standalone songs, as well as his opera Treemonisha. Now we will move on to the 20th century focusing on William Grant Still and Margaret Bonds. William Grant Still lived from 1895 through 1978, and he was an American conductor as well as composer, and he is known as the Dean of Afro-American Composers because he achieved many firsts through his career as a Black composer and conductor. So a little bit about his background. He started taking music lessons at the age 15, starting with violin. But then during that same period, he also self-taught himself so many other instruments, including, so he taught himself to play clarinet, saxophone, oboe, double bass, cello, and viola, in addition to taking violin lessons at age 15. And he started his studies at Wilberforce University in HBCU. And actually, his major was not music. It was he was going for a Bachelor of Science degree because his mother wanted him to go to medical school. So that's how he started. You know, he's like, okay, I gotta be practical and do what mom asks, right? And but while he was at university, he did conduct the university band, and he also started to compose and do orchestrations while he was in this degree. And then he did end up leaving the school without graduating. He did not finish that Bachelor of Science degree. But then he started at Boston Conservatory, using money lent to him from his father after his father's death. So he was able to study music at Boston Conservatory, but he did struggle financially during his studies. So much so that he could not afford to take composition lessons. So while he was there, George Whitfield Andrews agreed to teach William Grant Still composition for free, $3.99, because he could not afford to pay for composition lessons. So he was able to study during that time, and he did graduate from Boston Conservatory. After that, he served. He joined the U.S. Navy in 1918 and served in World War I. And then after that period, he moved to Harlem. And it was during this point that he became involved with many Harlem Renaissance figures, including Langston Hughes, Arna Bonpland, Countee Cullen. All of them were around the same social circles. So during the 1930s, he worked as an arranger of popular music, even writing music for NBC radio broadcasts. That's how he made his living. And he received a total of 3 Guggenheim Fellowships over his career. One in 1934, one in 1935, and then one in 1938. He used the first one to write his first opera, Blue Steel, which has not been done still to this day. And then, during his lifetime, he wrote around 200 works, including symphonies, operas, art songs, choral music. He wrote all kinds of music. So when we're thinking about William Grant Still's legacy, the reason he was called the Dean of Afro-American Composers. So he was the first Black composer to have his symphony performed by a leading orchestra in 1931. His first symphony, the Afro-American Symphony, was performed by the Rochester Philharmonic. And then that was later performed by major orchestras in New York, Chicago, LA, Berlin, Paris, and London. He is also the first Black conductor to conduct a major American symphony. In 1936, he conducted the LA Philharmonic at the Hollywood Bowl, one of his own pieces. And then he was also the first Black composer to have his opera performed by a major opera company. That was in 1949, when the New York City Opera performed his opera, Troubled Island, which was performed 10 years after it was written. And then after his death, he racked up another first, being the first his opera to be performed on national television, first opera by a Black composer. And that was his opera, A Bayou Legend, performed on national television in 1981, 3 years after his death. So he was
kind of a really groundbreaking composer because he was what, composers were looking up to. All the things he achieved during his lifetime were kind of aspirational to people coming up behind him. And he created so much music during his lifetime. So if we take a look at his vocal music in particular, these are all the operas he wrote: Lucille, which has not been done, Troubled Island, Highway 1 USA, which is actually being done at LA Opera right now. And these are the rest of his operas, which I believe A Bayou Legend was done on national television, but the rest of these I don't believe have been performed before. And he also wrote tons of art songs, so I've listed a couple of his song collections, but he wrote lots of standalone art songs as well, in addition to these. So I have a photo of the arias, duets, and opera scenes anthology here in the middle, and then his art song collection as well. So now I will share with you a piece by Wayne Grantstill from his Songs of Separation. This is the final song in this cycle, and it's called A Black Pierrot. Margaret Bonds, who lived from 1913 to 1972. And she was an American pianist, arranger, teacher, in addition to being a composer. And she studied music from a very young age. Her mother was also a musician and a music teacher. So she studied piano, starting at the Coleridge-Taylor School of Music in Chicago, and where she was taught piano by her mother. And while she was there, she had a lot of exposure to lots of musicians because her mother was very active in the musical community in Chicago. A lot of times, her mother would have musicians, artists, and writers over their home. They would all get together. And so after she had studied with her mom, she had started studying with Florence Price and William Dawson, starting at age 13. And she studied with them for a few years, and then finally in 1929, she began her studies at Northwestern University. where she earned her Bachelor of Music in Piano in 1933 and Master of Music in Composition in 1934. And while she was there, she had to endure quite a bit of racism. You know, she was not allowed to live on campus. She was not allowed to use the practice facilities. And, you know, she was going through it while she was there, you know, trying to just get her schooling, achieve what she wanted to achieve with all this adversity thrown at her. It was while she was at Northwestern that she stumbled upon Langston Hughes' poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. And she came across this poem while she was at Evanston Library, because she couldn't use the library at school. And this poem is what helped to inspire her and have the resolve to keep going. And she then later set that poem to music. So after she obtained her degrees from Northwestern, she stayed in Chicago to teach. And one of her most famous students was Ned Rorem. And then in 1939, she had moved to New York City, where she attended the Juilliard School, studying composition, and she actually tried to pursue lessons with Nadia Boulanger, but she would not take her on as a student, because she believed that Margaret did not need any further study. So that is what she said. After hearing The Negro Speaks of Rivers, in particular, she's like, you don't need any further study, so she wouldn't take her on as a student. So we're not sure if she actually really meant that, or maybe that was due to racism, but you know, I guess we'll never know. So while she was attending Juilliard, she lived in Harlem, and she made her living by editing music, and she also collaborated on many popular songs. So while she was there, she formed the Margaret Bonds Chamber Society, which was a group of Black musicians who performed primarily works by Black composers. So she created this really rich musical community in Harlem. And also while living in Harlem, she became really close with Langston Hughes, the poet. They collaborated on many of her pieces, and they've built this really strong relationship ever since they met in 1936. When she would have concerts out of town, he couldn't come, he would send her letters, which I'll show a little bit of that, I believe, very soon. So if we think, what's interesting about Margaret Bonds is that a lot of her manuscripts were thought to be lost. There we go. Yeah, thought to be lost when she died. So it wasn't until 2013 when Georgetown University acquired 18 boxes of her manuscripts and correspondence. And these were called the Margaret Bonds Papers. So what I have here, the top photo is a little ditty that she wrote, "Merry Christmas every day to Langston" from Margaret. And then this is also a photo of one of her pieces that she wrote as a gift to Langston. And so, like I said, they collaborated on many pieces of music. For example, I guess I don't have it listed here. Well, what people might not know about Margaret Bonds is that she wrote quite a few musicals. So here's a list of her musicals listed here, and the third bullet here, Shakespeare in Harlem, that libretto was written by Langston Hughes himself. They collaborated on that musical. And they also collaborated on her Songs of the Seasons, 3 Dream Portraits, and also her cantata Simon Bore the Cross, which is based off of the spiritual He Never Said a Mumbling Word. So in here I have photos of 2 anthologies. This blue and purple one has been out for a while now. These are her 7 spiritual arrangements. And this one in the pink and orange is a newer anthology called Rediscovering Margaret Bonds, which was curated by Dr. Louise Toppin. She was very instrumental and she's been very instrumental in publishing the kind of thought to be lost songs and manuscripts of these composers of the African diaspora. So now I'm going to share with you one last song by Margaret Bonds. This is from her 3 Dream Portraits, and this is the first one. It's called Minstrel Man, with text by Langston Hughes.
One of the big ones being Florence Price, who taught Margaret Bonds and had many firsts herself. The first symphony by an African American woman to be performed by a major symphony was Florence Price's first symphony. And these are all other contemporaries if you are curious about people composing in the similar style of this era to do some research on. Now I'm going to briefly reference some 21st century composers, starting with the Blacknificent Seven, which is a new collective that was created, composer collective created during the pandemic as a way to provide opportunity for feedback, collaboration, and friendship. And this was actually started during Karen Slack's virtual talk show, Kiki Conversations. She had all of these composers on for one of the episodes that she published, and they decided to form this collective and keep in touch after they had this interview about the lives of, you know, being an up-and-coming Black American composer. So these are all the people of that collective, and Jessie Montgomery in particular has just won a Grammy, which is very exciting. Other contemporaries of these people, of present-day 21st century composers, are listed here. Some of my favorites include Leslie Adams, Adolphus Hellstork, Damian Sneed, but these are all really great people to look into in addition to the Blacknificent Seven. Now, I have a few resources listed here to help you find repertoire if you're looking to program this. So this top one has been the one I've used the most. This is a new resource published by Dr. Louise Toppin, called the African Diaspora Music Project. It's basically a database where you can search music by, you know, any composer of the African diaspora. I mean, it doesn't have everything, but it has a lot. I've used this a lot when I'm curating recitals and programs. I'll just type in if I want a piece by a certain composer, if I want pieces by a certain poet with poetry, I can just type in the poet's name and it'll list every single setting by that poet. And it has vocal music and also some orchestral music as well in this database. Before there was the African Diaspora Music Project, there was the African American Arts Online, which still exists, but this was kind of one of the first resources. This organization was created in 1997 by Daryl Taylor to further the research and performance of African American art song. And they have a conference every 5 years. Their last one was in 2022, which I attended. It was very fun. And so this has a really good starting place if you just want to see the composers that they have featured on there, where a good place to start. If you don't know who to even search in the database, this would be a really good place to just get a general idea. Then we also have the Spirituals database. And this is a resource with so many historical spiritual recordings. So this resource has been really helpful if I'm trying to listen to different spiritual arrangements. If I want to hear Roland Hayes singing spiritual recordings, all of those are on there, all the way up through present day, which is really cool. And then the last one I have here is musicbyblackcomposers.org, and this is a website that doesn't have just vocal music, it has instrumental music. It's a really great resource to just, it has links to anthologies and things where you can get a good start on looking at this repertoire. So I have a few anthologies that I think are really great places to start when looking for this repertoire. And these all can be purchased on Amazon. Classical Vocal Reprints also prints a lot of art song by
composers of the African Diaspora, and also Hildegard Publishing has some of these anthologies. So I remember some of the first songs I learned were out of this Willis Patterson anthology, the light green, that I found at my school library at the University of Maryland, and I still go back to this one. This is one of the first anthologies published with this repertoire. And then Willis Patterson did a second anthology, that's the orange one here. The third one on the top row, in blue and gray and black, is Louise Toppin's anthology. So that includes African Diaspora songs as well, whereas the other two are more specific to Black American composers. And this new anthology by Louise Toppin is really cool because it has songs in a lot of different keys, so it's not just one high voice or low voice. There's like a good mix of keys throughout this anthology. And then, of course, we have art songs and spirituals by African American women composers, which you can buy at Hildegard Publishing. And that one, I believe, has a high voice version and a low voice version. And then this one is a newer anthology, Art Songs and Spirituals by contemporary African American composers. And then the last one I have here is a newer anthology of art songs by African American composers. So I think these are really good places to start if you're interested in programming, learning this repertoire. And then if there's a certain composer that really strikes your fancy, there's a lot of anthologies of their songs. I know there's Florence Price anthology of 44 songs. There's the Margaret Bonds anthology that I mentioned earlier. And some of the music, a lot of the Samuel Coleridge-Taylor songs are actually on IMSLP. So that could be a really good resource as well. I found a lot of scores on IMSLP, including some Scott Joplin songs. So depending on, like, I guess, copyright and things, some of the scores you can find on IMSLP. But these are all really great resources. All right, that is all I have for today. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
What about resources to find the sheet music for, you mentioned a lot of songs, what about for arias or excerpts from operas?
Yes, so for operas, what I've mentioned, a lot of the scores, I think what's kind of unfortunate is that, like, for some operas, there's not like a piano vocal score that you can just like buy like for standard composers. Even for, I think there are some for William Grant Still's operas, but a lot of them, I've noticed people only have access to them if they are engaged with the company doing that specific work. So I think a lot of it, if it's like a 21st century present day composer, it's probably easier to find scores. Like I know Leslie Adams' opera Blake, you can buy his piano vocal score online. William Grant Still has published on the William Grant Still Music website has like arias and duets and ensembles and things, like little excerpts, and a couple piano vocal, but not the whole thing. So I think that has to do with like publishing and copyright and things like that. So unfortunately, I'm hoping that there will be more resources in the future for having access to those kinds of pieces. But I have noticed what I didn't mention on the presentation, but the George Shirley vocal competition is like one that really champions music, and they require the singers to bring an aria by a Black composer. And so they share a lot of resources for how to find scores for things like that. It's kind of like on a case-by-case basis, I would say.
And I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but do you happen to know if these composers have written choral music to, do they have like catalogs of a lot of choral work, or have they mostly focused on like solo singing?
Yes, a lot of them do have very extensive choral work. I'm thinking Samuel Coleridge-Taylor in particular wrote lots of choral pieces, and William Grant Still as well. Pretty much everyone I've listed today has a pretty extensive choral catalog in addition to the solo voice, opera, all of those things.
Wonderful.
Yes?
If we were, say, looking to program a recital pretty soon, which may be happening, and wanted to program works from some of the 21st century composers or explore works with some of the 21st century composers Are the anthologies that you said, are those mostly earlier things? Would we just go directly look up these composers' personal websites for the really current stuff?
Yeah, I would say like the newest stuff, you probably have to go by composer, like their
Yeah.
website and things, but there is an anthology for contemporary music, which I don't know how new that anthology is, so it might not be like current, like they're alive right now, but you know, but I usually it's very helpful. Like I know we did a concert with Opera on Tap last week and the week before, and someone presented songs by Jeremiah Evans, and he just reached out to me. He's like, yeah, I listened to these songs and I really like them, and was able to communicate with them to get the scores. So I think that's the easiest way with current composers.
Thank you.
All right.
Wonderful. Thank you.